So many people reach a point where they lie down at the end of a long day, or they finally take a weekend to do nothing, and they expect to feel better. They expect the exhaustion to lift. They expect their body and mind to refill with energy. But what they notice instead is that nothing changes. Or sometimes they feel even worse. The tiredness gets heavier, the mind gets duller, the body feels more distant and empty, and this is confusing because rest is supposed to help. Lying down is supposed to restore you. Closing your eyes is supposed to make things better. When it doesn't, it starts to feel like a personal failure, like your body is broken, like you're doing rest wrong. And that confusion alone can be exhausting. In the next few minutes, I'm going to explain why rest hasn't been working for you and what your body has actually been asking for instead. What we need to understand first and foremost is that not all stillness is rest. The body can be still while the nervous system is running at full speed. You can be lying flat on your back, not moving a muscle, while your internal state is still in high alert. Your heart might be calm, your breath might be slow, but underneath that, the system that governs your energy is still scanning for threat, still managing risk, still bracing for something to go wrong. This is the difference between rest and collapse. And it's a difference that matters more than most people realize. Rest, true rest, is something your nervous system chooses when it feels safe enough to let go. It's not just a physical position, it's not just the absence of movement, it's an internal state where the body shifts its resources away from vigilance and into repair, where the metabolism changes, where the brain starts to process and file away the experiences of the day rather than constantly scanning the horizon, where the muscles can actually release their background tension, where digestion and circulation and all the quiet maintenance systems get the blood flow and attention they need. This kind of rest requires safety, not just physical safety, but an internal signal that says, for this moment, you are not needed to be on guard. Collapse is different. Collapse is what happens when the body is too depleted to keep going, but too unsafe to let go. It's a shutdown that still contains bracing. You lie down because you have no choice. The energy is gone, the will is gone, but the nervous system hasn't received the all-clear signal. So it stays half on, it stays ready, it stays in a kind of low-grade survival mode that burns energy even when you're not moving. This is why you can sleep for 10 hours and wake up feeling like you ran a marathon. This is why a weekend of doing nothing can leave you feeling more numb and more detached than before. The body was still, but the nervous system never got the message that it could rest. And this is where survival mode enters the picture. When you've been running on empty for a long time, when you've been pushing through stress or pressure or uncertainty, your nervous system adapts. It learns that the world is demanding. It learns that you can't afford to drop your guard. It learns that energy must be rationed for emergencies, so it starts to manage your system differently. It keeps a constant background hum of readiness. It tightens the muscles along your spine. It keeps your senses tuned for sudden changes. It keeps your mind in a loop, reviewing and rehearsing and checking for danger. This is an intelligent response. It's protective, it's trying to keep you safe, but it comes at a cost. That cost is your ability to recover. Because recovery doesn't come from lying down. Recovery comes from safety. The nervous system has to trust that it can turn off the alarms. It has to trust that if it lets go of vigilance, you won't be caught off guard. It has to trust that your environment, your relationships, your internal expectations are not about to demand another emergency response. And when that trust isn't there, the system stays on. It stays in survival mode, and no amount of physical stillness will convince it otherwise. This is why so many people feel worse when they try to rest. They finally give themselves permission to stop, and the moment they stop, everything they've been holding at bay comes rushing in. The anxiety, the overwhelm, the sadness, the physical pain they didn't have time to feel. This happens because survival mode doesn't just keep you alert. It also suppresses anything that would slow you down. It suppresses digestion, deep emotion, healing, reflection. All of those processes take energy and attention. And when you're in survival mode, energy and attention are reserved for immediate threats. So when you finally lie down and the system starts to sense that the emergency is over, all the suppressed experiences start to surface. The body starts to feel what it couldn't feel before. The mind starts to process what it couldn't process. and that can feel terrible. It can feel like rest is making you worse. But what's actually happening is that the protection of survival mode is wearing off and the backlog is appearing. This is a sign that your system is trying to find its way back to regulation. But if you don't understand what's happening, it's easy to interpret it as failure. It's easy to think, I can't even rest right. And we need to talk about effort here, because one of the most damaging ideas we have about rest is that it should be earned. That you have to push yourself to the limit before you deserve to stop. That rest is a reward for exhaustion. This belief keeps people in a cycle where they override their early signals of fatigue. They push through. They ignore the whisper of tiredness. They wait until the system collapses, and then they call that collapse rest. But the nervous system doesn't work that way. It doesn't reward effort with recovery. It responds to signals of safety. And when you push yourself to the edge, you are sending the opposite signal. You are telling your system that the world is demanding, that you cannot afford to listen to your needs, that your well-being is secondary to your output. This reinforces survival mode. It teaches the nervous system that rest is dangerous because the moment you rest, you might fall behind, you might disappoint someone, you might lose your grip on everything you're holding up. So the system learns to resist rest. It learns to keep you in a state of productive anxiety, even when you're lying still. The mental and emotional load is a huge part of this. Many people think of exhaustion as physical. They think if their muscles aren't sore, they shouldn't be tired. But the nervous system spends most of its energy on prediction. It is constantly reading the environment, interpreting social cues, managing emotional expectations, planning for what might happen next. This is invisible work. It's the work of making appointments, remembering obligations, anticipating conflicts, smoothing over tensions, keeping track of what you've said and what you haven't said, managing your presence so you don't seem too much or too little. This load doesn't show up in your step count, but it drains your system just as surely as running a race. And when this load is chronic, when you're always managing, always anticipating, always adjusting, the nervous system doesn't get a break. It doesn't matter if you're sitting in a comfortable chair. It doesn't matter if your body is still. The internal work continues, and the energy keeps draining. This is why pushing makes fatigue worse. When you push yourself to be productive, to be social, to keep up appearances, when you override the signals that say you need to stop, you are adding to the load. You are asking your nervous system to manage not only the original stress, but also the stress of performing while depleted. This is like driving a car with no oil. The engine doesn't just run poorly, it starts to damage itself. And the nervous system, when pushed past its capacity, doesn't just get tired. It starts to lose its ability to regulate. It starts to toggle between high alert and shutdown, never quite finding the middle ground where true rest lies. This is the cycle so many people are stuck in. They push until they collapse. They collapse but don't restore. They feel worse, so they push again because at least when they're busy, they don't have to feel how bad they feel. And around it goes. But energy does return. It does. And it returns not through force, not through better time management, not through more discipline. It returns when safety is restored, when the nervous system finally gets the signal over and over in small ways and large ways that it no longer needs to be on guard. This signal can come from many places. It can come from a predictable routine. It can come from relationships where you don't have to perform. It can come from giving yourself permission to say no without explaining yourself. It can come from letting your environment be messy and your to-do list be incomplete. It can come from small moments of sensory pleasure that have no goal. The warmth of a blanket, the sound of rain, the taste of something sweet. These are not rewards for productivity. These are signals of safety. And each one tells the nervous system, for this moment, you are not needed to manage risk. You can let go a little. And as those signals accumulate, something shifts. The background tension starts to soften. The mind starts to wander without snapping back to worry. The body starts to feel heavy in a good way. The sleep starts to feel like it actually touched the deep places. This is slow. It is not linear. Some days you will feel better, and some days the exhaustion will come back like a wave. But the overall direction changes when the nervous system starts to trust that rest is not a trap, that stillness is not a threat, that you are not about to be ambushed by an emergency the moment you let your guard down. This is the heart of the difference between rest and collapse. Rest is active in its own quiet way. It is the system actively choosing repair. Collapse is the system running out of options. And many people have never been taught to recognize the difference. They think because they are lying down, they are resting. They think because they are not working, they are recovering. But the nervous system doesn't count hours, it counts signals, it measures safety. And if the signals say danger, stillness is just a different kind of effort. It's the effort of holding yourself together while pretending to let go. So if you have been trying to rest and finding that it doesn't help, if you have been taking time off and feeling worse, if you have been sleeping long hours and waking up empty, you are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not doing it wrong. What you are experiencing is the gap between physical stillness and nervous system safety. And that gap is real. It is not a personal failing. It is a biological response to an environment that has asked too much of you for too long. Your system is trying to protect you. It has learned that protection means vigilance, and unlearning that takes time. It takes repeated experiences of safety. It takes allowing yourself to be still without an agenda. It takes letting your environment be imperfect and your responsibilities wait. It takes understanding that exhaustion is often not a sign that you failed to rest correctly, but a sign that your system is still trying to keep you safe. The next part of this conversation will look at how to create those signals of safety, how to teach your nervous system, moment by moment, that rest is not dangerous, how to build a life where energy returns not because you chased it, but because you finally stopped chasing everything else. For now, what matters is that you stop blaming yourself, that you recognize the intelligence in your exhaustion, that you understand the difference between rest and collapse, and that you start to see your tiredness not as a character flaw, but as a protective response that, with time and safety, can finally soften. You are not broken. You are tired in a way that lying down cannot fix. And that is not because you are doing something wrong. It is because your system is asking for something deeper than stillness. It is asking for safety. And that is a need, not a weakness. The confusion between rest and collapse runs so deep that most people have never actually experienced true rest, not even once in their adult lives. They have experienced sleep. They have experienced zoning out in front of a screen. They have experienced vacations where they were physically distant from their responsibilities, but mentally still chained to them. But the kind of rest where the nervous system fully releases its grip, where the body sinks into a weight that feels like belonging rather than paralysis, where the mind drifts without being snapped back by a subtle hum of worry, this is rare. And it's rare not because it's difficult to achieve, but because the conditions for it are so specific and so rarely met. Think about what happens when you lie down at night. For many people, the moment their head hits the pillow is the moment their mind starts racing. They replay conversations. They anticipate tomorrow's problems. They catalog everything they forgot to do. This isn't because they're bad at sleeping. It's because the stillness of the body has removed the distractions that kept their survival mode in the background. When you're moving through your day, even in a depleted state, there are tasks and interactions that occupy the mind just enough to keep the deeper anxieties at bay. But when you stop, those anxieties surface. And the nervous system interprets this surfacing as a threat. It thinks if I'm thinking about all these dangers, then the dangers must be real and present. So it stays alert, it keeps you in a light, vigilant sleep if it lets you sleep at all. And in the morning, you wake up feeling like you fought a battle you can't remember. This is why the concept of sleep hygiene sometimes misses the point. You can have the perfect mattress, the perfect temperature, the perfect blackout curtains, but if your nervous system doesn't feel safe enough to let go of the day, none of that matters. Safety isn't about the perfection of your environment. It's about the signals your environment sends. A cluttered room might feel safe to one person if that clutter represents freedom and authenticity. A pristine room might feel dangerous to another if it represents the pressure to maintain appearances. The nervous system reads meaning not just sensory input, it reads the emotional tone of your space. It reads the expectations that hang in the air. It reads whether stillness is allowed or whether stillness is just a pause before the next demand. And this brings us to the mental and emotional load in more detail, because this is the invisible weight that so many people carry without recognizing it. The mental load isn't just about having a lot on your mind. It's about the constant low-level management of the gap between what is and what should be. It's the energy spent maintaining a version of yourself that meets external standards while your internal experience is something else entirely. It's the effort of seeming fine when you're not, of being pleasant when you're angry, of being confident when you're uncertain. This is not lying. This is survival. This is what the nervous system learns to do in environments where authenticity is risky, where showing tiredness gets you labeled as lazy, where showing anxiety gets you labeled as difficult, where showing sadness gets you labeled as broken. So the system splits. It creates a public self that manages appearances and a private self that holds the truth. And the energy required to maintain that split is enormous. It's like running two operating systems at once. And when you finally lie down and try to rest, the split doesn't automatically close. The public self might be off duty, but the private self is still holding the backlog, and the nervous system is still managing the risk that the split will be discovered, that someone will need you, that something will fall apart while you're gone, that the version of you that keeps everything running will vanish if you let go. This is why people often feel guilty when they rest. The guilt isn't just a thought pattern, it's a nervous system signal. Guilt is the body's way of saying, if you stop, the thing you're holding up will fall, and that fall will be dangerous. And often that's true. Not because you're indispensable in some grand way, but because you've structured your life so that the maintenance of appearances, the smoothing of tensions, the remembering of details, all falls on you. And if you rest, those things don't get done, or they get done imperfectly. And imperfection in a survival mode mind is a threat. It means exposure. It means conflict. It means the potential for rejection or failure. So you push through the tiredness. And pushing does something very specific to the nervous system. It activates the sympathetic branch, the part that handles action and urgency. And when that branch stays active for long periods, it changes your baseline. Your body starts to think that this activated state is normal. It starts to think that calm is actually dangerous because calm means you're not preparing. Calm means you're not ready. So when you try to access calm on purpose through rest, the system resists. It interprets the calm as a loss of readiness. It interprets the stillness as a vulnerability. And it pulls you back into a state of subtle agitation. This is why some people feel more energized when they're busy and more depleted when they're still. The busyness is what their system knows. The stillness is what their system fears. But the sympathetic branch is only half the story. The other half is the dorsal vagal branch, the part of the nervous system that handles shutdown and conservation. When you're in survival mode for too long, when the demands exceed your resources for too many days in a row, the system doesn't just stay in high alert, it starts to oscillate between high alert and shutdown. It revs up to meet a demand, then collapses when the demand passes, then revs up again for the next one. This oscillation is exhausting. It feels like being stuck in a car that's either accelerating wildly or stalling out. There's no cruise control, there's no steady idle, and over time, this oscillation wears out the system's ability to regulate. The gap between activation and rest gets smaller, the rest gets shallower, the activation gets more brittle, and you end up in a state where you're always tired, but also always wired, where you can't sleep, but also can't function, where you can't rest, but also can't push. This is the state that so many people mistake for depression or laziness, but it's not a character flaw. It's a neurophysiological state. It's what happens when the nervous system has been asked to do the impossible for too long. It's what happens when the gap between what you need and what you're getting is so wide that the system can't bridge it anymore. And the tragedy is that the advice people get in this state often makes it worse. They get told to exercise more, to push through the fatigue, to stick to a routine, to be disciplined. But discipline in this context is just another demand, and the system is already overloaded with demands. So it can't respond to discipline with energy. It responds with more shutdown. It responds with more resistance. It responds with a deeper conviction that rest will never be safe. What the system needs instead is a gradual restoration of trust. Trust that rest won't be punished. Trust that stillness won't lead to disaster. Trust that you can drop the performance and still be okay. And this trust can't be built through willpower. It has to be built through experience, through small, repeated demonstrations that safety is possible, that letting go doesn't cause everything to fall apart, that you can be imperfect, unavailable, unproductive, and still survive, still be valued, still belong. This is why the path out of collapse is not a heroic journey. It's not about finding the perfect relaxation technique or the ideal morning routine. It's about noticing the tiny moments when your shoulders drop without you telling them to. It's about noticing when your breath deepens naturally. It's about noticing when you look out a window and your mind is quiet just for a second. These are not insignificant. These are the signals that your nervous system is testing safety. It's dipping a toe into the water of rest and seeing if the water is fine. And every time the water is fine, every time you don't immediately have to snap back to vigilance, the system learns. It learns that rest is not a trap. It learns that collapse is not the only option. It learns that there is a middle ground between high alert and shutdown, a place where you can be still and aware, relaxed and present, safe and alive, all at the same time. And this is where energy starts to return, not in a dramatic surge, not in a sudden revelation, but in small, almost imperceptible ways. You notice that you can read a paragraph and remember what it said. You notice that you can stand up without feeling dizzy. You notice that a conversation doesn't drain you for the entire day. These are the signs that your system is coming back online in a regulated way, that the constant background drain of survival mode is easing, that your energy is no longer being poured into a bottomless cup of vigilance, that some of it is starting to stay with you, to build, to accumulate. This process is slow because the nervous system is conservative. It doesn't change its mind easily. It has one job: to keep you alive. And if vigilance has kept you alive so far, it's not going to abandon that strategy just because you took one relaxing bath. It needs evidence. It needs repeated, consistent evidence that safety is the new normal, that you are not going to put yourself back in harm's way the moment you feel a little better, that you are going to protect your own energy the way you would protect a child who needs rest. And this is the shift that has to happen internally. You have to become the protector of your own safety. You have to start noticing when you're pushing yourself into survival mode and gently pulling yourself back, not with force, not with shame, but with the same kindness you would show someone you love. You have to start questioning the voice that says you don't have time to rest, that voice that says you'll fall behind, that voice that says your worth is tied to your output. That voice is not truth. That voice is a learned survival strategy. And it can be unlearned, but only if you're willing to tolerate the discomfort of doing less while your system recalibrates. This is why many people feel worse before they feel better. When you start to choose safety over survival, when you start to say no, when you start to let things be imperfect, your nervous system initially interprets this as increased danger. It thinks if we're not vigilant, if we're not performing, the threats will multiply. So it raises the alarm, it makes you feel anxious, it makes you feel guilty, it makes you feel like you're making a terrible mistake. This is the extinction burst of survival mode. It's the system's last-ditch effort to keep you in the strategy that has kept you safe. And if you don't know what it is, it's easy to interpret it as a sign that you're going in the wrong direction. It's easy to give up and go back to pushing. But if you can recognize it for what it is, just a nervous system, learning a new way of being, you can ride it out. You can keep choosing safety even when it feels dangerous. And eventually, the system catches up. It starts to see that the world didn't end when you rested. It starts to see that your relationships didn't collapse when you were honest about your limits. It starts to see that you are still okay, even when you're doing nothing. This is how energy returns. Not because you found the perfect supplement or the perfect sleep schedule, but because you taught your nervous system that it doesn't have to spend energy on vigilance anymore. That energy can be used for repair, for digestion, for immune function, for creative thinking, for joy, for connection. All the things that were suppressed in survival mode start to come back online when the system trusts that it's safe. And they come back slowly in pieces, not all at once. You might find that you suddenly have the energy to cook a meal, but not to clean the kitchen. Or you might find that you can enjoy a conversation, but need 3 hours of quiet afterwards. This is normal. This is the system allocating its returning resources carefully. It's testing what it can handle, it's rebuilding its reserves, and it needs you to be patient with it. It needs you to not interpret these partial returns as failures. They are signs of progress. So, if you have been lying down and not feeling restored, if you have been sleeping and waking up empty, if you have been desperate for rest and finding that rest makes you feel worse, please hear this. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not failing at something everyone else finds easy. You are experiencing the gap between physical stillness and nervous system safety. And that gap is real. It is not in your head, it is in your body, it is in the learned patterns of your autonomic state. And it can change, but it changes through safety, not through effort. It changes through small, consistent experiences of being allowed to be still without consequence. It changes through protecting your energy the way you would protect someone you love. It changes through recognizing that exhaustion is often not a sign that you're not doing enough, but a sign that your system is protecting you from doing too much. The next part of this conversation will look at how to create those signals of safety, how to teach your nervous system, moment by moment, that rest is not a trap, how to build a life where energy returns not because you chased it, but because you finally stopped chasing everything else. For now, what matters is that you stop blaming yourself, that you recognize the intelligence in your exhaustion, that you understand the difference between rest and collapse, and that you start to see your tiredness not as a character flaw, but as a protective response that, with time and safety, can finally soften.